What's up, bros? Welcome to another BroGraph motion graphics tutorial. I'm Dave Koss, and today we got a really fun one. It's going to cover a lot of stuff in Octane 3, all the environment stuff. So we're talking fog, we're talking like smoke, we're talking fire, clouds, all that kind of stuff. When I see something new, sometimes I'm a little reluctant, especially if it's a little complicated to do it. Like when Reflectance Channel came out, I'm like, I don't like change. I don't know what to do here. But I finally started digging into some of this stuff in Octane 3 and volume objects, stuff like that. And I'm starting to figure it out. It's gotten much better and much more stable in the latest Octane 3 Alpha 6 v3 release, which is crazy complicated and convoluted. But that's the one that I'm on right now. It's way more stable than it was before. And I wanted to share what I've learned so far. I'm still digging into it, but I really found out a lot of stuff. And one of the things I'm going to do as well is kind of integrate our new plugin. It's a lot of thunder. Integrate our new plugin, which is about to come out and may be out by the time any of you see this tutorial. I think it's coming out in like 2 weeks. So, I'm going to share what I learned so far. First thing I'm going to start out with is the volume object. So let's take a look. Object. The first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to open my Octane window, and I'm going to go to Objects, and I'm going to do an Octane fog volume, just so you can see what this is. Right now, it's just a big block, and it's got what you call voxels in them, which I didn't quite understand what they were exactly until I started playing with them. But if you are working on a computer that doesn't have that decent of a video card, and even if you are, I guess, it's always good to bring up your voxel size to start with, because what happens is you start really cranking down the voxel size and your viewport's going to start kind of flipping out and stuff. That combined with the fact that this is still kind of an alpha plugin, you might get a little weirdness going on or some lockups or stuff like that. So we're going to start with just this blank deal here, and you can see like what the voxels look like. They're just these blocks. And so if I turn on my render engine, you can see what's going on here. This is just like a blob of nothingness. The next thing I'm going to do is put in just a generic sky, just so we have a little bit of light, an HDRI environment, not a sky, but okay, so we have this here. Now, on your volume object, like I said, you've got default, and that's just blocks, just standard blocks, and there's just nothing going on with it. You've got cloud, and what this does is it's just a default texture that it kind of puts into here. So you can see what happens, right? If I put this in here, all it does is it adds a noise into these voxels. Is kind of 3D. Now, if you really want to see what this is doing in the viewport, you just up the voxels a little bit, and I'll try and, there we go, outline those. See, so those are the voxels. They're really big right now, but they're representing what you're seeing here in size. Now, I'm going to show you a little bit better representation so you can kind of understand this a little bit better. I'm going to go to texture, and I'm going to go to surfaces and tiles, and I'm going to put in lines instead so we can kind of see what's going on here. And I'm going to make like black and white lines like you do. I'm going to go back to my volume object and just make this a little taller so that we can see what's going on here a little bit. So it's basically projecting lines like we have in here through the volume object, and those voxels are basically turning into pieces of fog. And you know, if I lower the voxel size, you can see what's going on. It's kind of like resolution, right? So there you go. So they're just kind of stacked up in a big box. Now, if I go back to the cloud object, you know, and you could do random cloud too. This will give you an idea of how this works. Now, I somehow clicked on the wrong thing. Let me go back. Okay, cloud. Random cloud, I think, gives you just like random things. Now, you can go in here and adjust it because it's just a regular noise like you usually see. If I put in something else like, I don't know, just a standard noise, you can see what it does there. If I go back to volume, I could actually look at display type here. And the display type will sometimes, depending on what you use, give you a better idea of what's going on. So I'm changing that to circle. I'm going to up my voxels so you can see what's going on in the picture. See how you can see the color differences here? Let me go back to standard cloud because it's easier to see. Now see right here how it's darker, it's denser. Over here it's kind of this, it's kind of a lighter blue color. So that kind of is a representation of the density. And then the darker places here are where you can see through it a little bit more. So that's what's going on. And I'll up the voxels again now. You can see on a bigger scale what's going on. This is kind of what helped me figure out what this was by kind of changing these up and seeing what different noise patterns and stuff did. So I did the tile lines. Let's learn how light interacts with this block. I'm going to go back to the default block to start, and I'm just going to make it 100 all the way around. So we've got just a completely 100% dense block. So we've learned how you can affect the density of the fog. Now we're going to learn how you can affect the, like what you can do with light and how different kinds of light affect the fog and so on. I'm going to go to the sky and I'm going to change this to just a black sky because I want to really see only what the light's doing here. And I'm going to add an octane area light and I'm going to bring it out right here. So the first thing that you see is it kind of hits the front and then there's really not much left. It's really dense. The light doesn't go all the way through. And to help you better understand, I'm going to build just this real quick scene in here. I'm going to put a plane at the bottom and scale it up. And then I'm going to take a cube and scale it down a little bit. And I'm going to put it inside just at the bottom so we can see what's going on. You can barely make it out inside this volume object. Now, that's because of the density itself. Now, we're not going to change anything in the volume right now. We're going to leave it on default, and we're going to go over to the medium tab. And in the medium tab, you've got absorption, scattering, emission, all this stuff we'll talk about in a little bit when we get into kind of some smoke stuff. But I'm going to change the density and bring it down to like 5. Now you see what's happening is this is like, you know, how much light actually pushes all the way through. So this is kind of nice because now you can see what's going on inside. You can see that cube coming out. So I wanted to show how different patterns in the light will actually affect this. And you can actually go, if you don't have the plugin yet, obviously you can go into your light and you can load a texture that'll shoot different lines or patterns through your volume object. So you can try this yourself if you don't have the plugin, but I am going to show you this with the new Brograph plugin. We talked about voxel size. One other thing before we get to that I also want to show off, which is pretty cool, is the fact that in Cloud, just like any other kind of noise, because that's what it is, this is your regular noise channel, it's not an Octane thing, you can affect movement and see the change happen here. So if I go to the volume noise and let's change the movement X to like 100 inches. And I'm going to go to 90 frames and set that. I'm going to go back to 0, set the movement to 0. The other thing that we have to do is turn on animation because animation speed's on 0. So if we just do like 1, okay, I'm going to go through this now and you'll be able to see as it updates. Oh, somehow that didn't save. Oh, because I hit keyframe. My bad. That will not change movement. There we go. Movement starts at 0 and it goes to 100 inches. And so what you can see is the in-between frames that were keyframed here are actually changing. So if you were to render that out, it would look like clouds moving through a box. There is an option that you can do here under object to do like a little bit of a feather. because obviously you wouldn't have like a cube of clouds. See, and that makes it more like, you know, actual clouds. It feathers it out. Just thought I'd throw that in there. But that's how you would animate some clouds real easily or something. So, okay, I'm going to go back to the default cube again at 100 by 100 by 100. And we're going to start messing with the plugin. I'm going to go to my content browser and load it up. You don't have to do this. You can just watch this part because it's fun to learn. I'm going to delete that area light that I made, and I'm going to open up this spotlight for Octane. And I'm going to shine it onto my box and my fog. Now the fog has kind of reset itself because I changed the defaults back. So let's go back. No, that's actually right. I'm going to go to my spotlight, and because I need to kind of push through this, I need to up the power on my spot. There we go. So you can see what's going on there. I've got a spot with no real fall off or anything because I really want this to be clean, and I'll show you what this does. In the spotlight, it's going to have options here. One of them is going to be window. So if I put window in here, you can see what it does. Because it's like a gobo, the light does not hit those pieces, and it creates that kind of cool looking effect that you get when you've got fog or volumetrics and light is shining through a window or something. So you can see what's happening there. Of course, you can invert it, which is fun. You could try some other things. I like to do stuff like tree is kind of fun. And I'll invert the tree back. You can see it kind of looks like there's a tree. I'll up my cone width, like a tree coming through the window. I can bring my fall off a little bit. And you can see what that does there into the fog. Now that that's there, we could do something like, I don't know, change the light. You can see you could have a lot of fun with this because there are a lot of options, and having that fog, there's like a million different really cool looks you can do. I'll put my fall off back down, and I'm going to go to this one called Party. And it puts this, let me turn my volume off for a minute so you can see what this does. I'll up my transparency. So there we go. So you could set your light, spotlight, and you could make it do this little party thing. If I turn this back on, you can see what it's doing. It's throwing that through the fog volume, which is really cool looking. So that's basically how that works. And we can go back into the fog volume now if we want and do something like hit cloud. And then we'll change this back to 100 tall so you can see what's going on. So now you're combining these two things. You got the rays coming through, but at the same time you have, you know, clouds like it's a fog machine. So now it's like you're actually at a rave or something. Let me kind of bring this up a little bit bigger so you can see what's going on. But, you know, considering the amount of stuff this is doing, the calculations, this is pretty amazing that this is possible in such a fast time using GPU. I'm going to grab the spotlight over here and turn it, and you can see what it does. So if you don't have the plugin, you could set this up yourself, just with an area light or something. But this is just a faster way to show a practical application for something like this. All right. So I've shown you how that works. Now I'm going to turn off my render engine, and I'm going to open up another project. We're going to go into this scene that I have set up with a little building, an HDRI, and we've got two little volume boxes here. And we're going to play around with those and kind of show what you can do with it. So I'm going to fire up the render engine here. Now, by default, nothing is loaded. So you got these two boxes. I've got one of them with a preset of fog and one of them with a preset of fire. And we're going to talk about what those are. I'm going to go to this first volume. This is a block like we were looking at earlier. Now, under the VDB tab, we can load VDB files. VDB files, a lot of people call them different things like volume database or voxel database, whatever. A lot of people say they're different things. You can load up your own VDB files, which you can either get from things that generate particles, you can get them from something like Houdini, or you can download them off the internet. OpenVDB.org has these like pre-made VDB files that you can use, which are pretty cool if you want to play around with it. I've already downloaded some of these. They got like a bunny and smoke and fire and explosion, all this stuff that you can play around with. So I'm going to go to smoke first, and I'm going to open it up, and you can see what it does here. It loads this smoke coming from the box. So there's a couple things that you got to know here. It basically overrides all your object stuff. So this size, this voxel stuff, none of that applies because that's already built into these VDB files. So you can see now if I zoom out, you've got smoke coming off of here. Now it's not very thick, so you can go to medium, I believe, and you can thicken it up. It just depends on what you're doing and what's in your scene. I'm gonna try and bring up this density a little bit and hope I don't crash anything. But there we go. So there's some smoke. Now, under VDB, you also have some other options. Like I said, you've got absorption and scatter scale, emission scale. You've got your offset. I don't believe this is animated, but if you have a VDB file that is animated, you have to make sure that your start and end times for your frames are set just like you would if you were bringing in like a movie file as a texture or an image sequence as a texture or something like that. You've got to set those different frames. Now that that's in here, I'm going to show you what's so cool about having these VDB files. Usually you're generating this stuff in maybe another project or another program even, like Houdini, like I said earlier, and you might want to reload this. And what's cool about that is, let's go to the project file here. Let's say that I've got these Cinema 4D files and I got my VDB files, and I got like this smoke version 2 that I think is better that I want to put in here. Well, I can get rid of this or rename it. I could call this smoke old. And I can take my smoke version 2 now that I've created somewhere else and ran the simulation somewhere else. I'm going to rename that smoke. So what's going to happen is if I come back in here now, I can refresh my render. It's going to bring in that VDB file, and now it's going to look like this instead. It's just real small, which brings me to the next point, which is you cannot scale this like on a regular model scale. You can't really do anything with this because it's set from the get-go from whatever generated the particles. So if you want to change the scale because the scale is not right, then you need to go to your coordinate tab here, or you could go to object scale mode, because you are changing the scale, not the size. And then you can up it this way, and this will bring it up. Now, some of this may get a little dangerous as far as what it looks like, because when you're generating those particles, you need to have your scale set from the get-go, or else it might look like steam on top of a building instead of like thick, rich, like ginormous smoke. So that's something that you want to kind of think of when you start your projects. So here's some other stuff that we can do with the VDB files. We've got like I said, the easily replaceable stuff. We've got alternative smoke that I put in there. There's also the stuff like I showed you on this page. Like there's a bunny. I have a file. Let me open my bunny cloud file for a minute. Show you what this will do. This will help us go over some of the other options. So there's a bunny. Super simple. And I've got them loaded up the same way that I did it before in my VDB. I have the bunny file. Now, something else you might want to do is go in here and change your absorption and your scattering. I like to bring this down all the way. Well, not all the way. All the way is going to make it disappear, but I like to bring it to 0.01. I get that better contrast there, absorption and scattering, and you can adjust these. Now, this also brings me to the point of color. You could change your absorption settings here and see how it's kind of blue, or bring it red. You can change the color, like what kind of color of light it absorbs. All of these options kind of change when you hit your presets. Before I get into the presets, I'll show you. We went over absorption and scattering, and down here in emission, we have these that are blank right now. But you could do something like go into your emission, add octane, texture emission. So in this case, what I think is going on is probably my emission scale is too high. I'm going to take that back down to default 1. Since I was jacking with all the settings earlier. There we go. Okay, you can see what's going on. So I've got this bunny loaded with the emission texture, and that kind of brightens him up in certain areas. So, and you can do the same things you usually do with emission textures, like cast illumination. I believe surface brightness will change things a bit, but I haven't really played with that yet. So you can see now it's giving off light. So that's how that works, and you can do a ramp too to change colors. Now I'm going to show you the easy way to kind of get started with this rather than starting from scratch. It's super easy. You just hit fire. So you can see the differences here. You've got, if you hit fog, it's doing the fog like we did earlier, or the smoke. You hit fire, and it's actually loading. I'll go back and forth. See, fog doesn't have any emission stuff, obviously, because fog doesn't, and smoke doesn't emit light. Fire does. So when you go to fire mode, it kind of loads these presets. You can go into emission. You can change the power. I'm going to bring up the power a bit and see if I can make this bigger for everybody to see. So you got your flaming bunny, and here's what the emission ramp does. If you go to here to this gradient, you can actually change the colors. Make them red. Change this, do some like weird colors and stuff, start mixing the colors. So you can see what that does. That puts a ramp in there. I haven't experimented too much with adjusting this. It looks though like the max value will kind of help you pull that gradient that you want. I haven't really tried much changing from linear to radial or whatnot, but that's basically where those controls are, what they're doing, emitting light, and you can go in here, tell it to cast illumination or not. So like I have an octane sky up here, and it's got a black background on it. So if I load a plane, for example, into my scene, put it below my bunny, probably have to reload here. Oh no, there it is. You can see what's going on. The particles have that emission, and it's casting that light there. Emission scale, can adjust this a little bit based on what scale the scene is, and that's also going to change how much light you see kind of bouncing in this case, because this could be like a really small bunny or it could be a really large bunny, and you would probably want to adjust that a little bit. If this were a really tiny bunny, like an inch tall, and we were far away, he might not give off that much light. But it also changes what he looks like a little bit as well. If I change my emission scale to 1, he should get a little bit brighter. Yeah, there we go. So that's the flaming bunny. And so we've covered all of that. Let's load an explosion back in the other scene, and let's see how that works now that we kind of know how all of that is supposed to be set up. So here's my scene. I'm going to fire it back up, and we had that other box that was full of fire before, but it didn't have a VDB file. So we've got some options on this volume object. I'm going to load, let's load fire. And you can see I load that up, and that's not exactly what we would like it to look like. So now that we kind of know some of the ins and outs, let's change the emission scale first of all to like 1, just to kind of have that at a default, because we don't really know how it's going to respond yet. And then back into medium, we have some different things we could play with. Number 1 is density, like we've talked about before, and if I bring that way down, you can see how that affects it. So all those particles are still there. It's just how dense is it in general, you know, as far as being able to see through it, or light going through it or not going through it. And then you can change the emission. For example, like if we were to go back to the sky and we were going to change the sky to just a plain color and make it black, There we go. We can see the light that's being given off on it. So then we can go in here to the emission and we can change how bright it is. And there we go. So now it's starting to look more like an actual flame instead of just a big jumbled mess of brightness. But that works fairly well. And then again, if it's an animated VDB file, then you'll be able to have the moving flames and whatnot. And let's do this now too. So we've got this here. Let's load an explosion instead. I'm going to change my color of my sky just a little bit. I'm going to make it like a dark bluish, just so it's kind of like not all the way nighttime, but just so we can see what we're doing. We can see what's going on with the building. And I'm going to go back to the volume object in VDB tab, and I'm going to load something different. Explosion. And load. All right, here we go. Now the explosion is bigger. And like I was saying earlier, it's predetermined by the VDB file, so you have to adjust this. So you can see now we have like this giant explosion going on. However, we've changed our emission and all that kind of stuff. So let's go in and jack the power back up on here so we can see what's going on, because this is a different type of file. You can see what's going on now. Giant explosion, which is cool. And we can see it coming off of the building. And we're just adjusting the emission power to affect that brightness in general. And that's, see, like right there, I've got it at about 100 and something. That's nice because nothing's blown out. You can see every bit of it. That's a really nice looking explosion, and that'll work fairly well. And then if you want to go back and adjust some other things, you can, like the overall brightness, for example, in your scene. You would do that with your camera tag rather than messing with the emission textures. So make it look pretty and make it look right, and then do the rest of the adjustments in camera. So there's explosion. Boom, it's blowing up. Now we're going to do an underwater scene, which Matt actually kind of made this scene the other day, just playing around. And I'm going to show, rather than using volume, using like a fog for your entire scene, the environment of the entire scene instead. So I've got this scene that he made. He put a Brograph light in there. Brograph spotlight. It's loading. Stand by. So we have the luminous Brograph Octane spotlight loaded in this little scene. We got just a couple pieces of terrain and some just, random pillar looking geometry just to start. The first thing that I'm going to do is create an HDRI environment, and I'm going to set to a color, and I'm going to set it to black so you can see what's going on with the spot. The spotlight's way out there. It's just lighting the scene as if it were the sun or something from up above. And that's that doesn't really look like underwater, does it? So the next thing that we'll do is we'll go to the environment tag for the sky, the HDRI that we just created, and now there's this new medium tab, and we're going to add fog. All that does is load a preset. It just puts a new scattering medium, absorption medium, everything in here that you would want. The thickness, I'm going to jack all the way up, and it looks black in here. It's so thick you can't see through it at all. Then I'm going to go in. The absorption is blank by default, so I believe that means that it's black, but you can go in and load your own black just in case into that channel. So you got black and white, phase, scale. Now the scale depends on your scene and your scene scale. So we had the thickness all the way up. Now we're just going to go into, sorry, I got lost. We're going to go into the medium, change the scale so you can see what happens here. We change the scale of the scene. It kind of changes the scale of the fog. And I'm looking for a place to where the fog kind of starts making things disappear. Like now I can't really see what's back there. The second thing that we got going on here is we can't really see it that well. So now that I have the scale and the fog and everything set, I'm going to go back to my Brograph Spotlight. I'm going to go to the power and really crank that sucker up. You can see what's happening here. Now there's a light color on it already that we had loaded. You could see it's kind of a light blue. You could change that though. Actually, if I do the drop down, we should be able to see this in real time. You know, you could do a yellow or something instead. That's kind of how that works. This is kind of white, but I'll leave it at blue for now. The other thing is that if we go into the preset gobos, we can load, and you can actually load your own in here if you want, but I'm going to load the other preset that I like, stones. This isn't quite caustics, but it looks like caustics. It's close enough to show you what's going on. If you had a good caustic pattern or like tileable version or something, you could load it and it would look really good. I like this, but it's not really blurry enough. So I'm going to go to the fall off and just take it up a notch. So it kind of blurs these. If you want, you can change the scale. There is the option here to lock your texture to the cone, which is on, which means if I change the cone size, theoretically it should just up the scale of the texture it's projecting in general. So you could change all of that. So this kind of looks like caustics. We've got it bright. Maybe we could bring it up even a little more on the brightness, on the power level. I'm going to really crank that so we can see what's going on. And if you wanted to go back to your environment, you could. You can change the thickness if you want to really do it that way. But I prefer to just have that all the way up and just adjust everything through scene scale. So you can see if I bring this further down or further up, what happens. If you want it to look really murky, you can do it that way. So this will kind of set, you know, what your visibility distance is by doing that. So I'm going to go in here. I have a cool looking area. The last thing that I'm going to do with this is just work with a camera, because that'll help me stylize this a little bit and make it look better, because right now it looks kind of washed out. So I'm going to go to objects, and I'm going to do an Octane camera, which makes a camera with a tag for Octane already on it. I'm going to turn it on so I can see what I'm doing. Now in your Octane camera tag, you've got a bunch of different options. One thing that you could do if you wanted to is you could crank this aperture. If you wanted to get some sort of depth of field, I'm going to crank this all the way up and turn off autofocus. Take my focus, and I'm going to focus right there on that pillar, on that pillar. You know, you can focus on different things and see what you like. I'm going to focus on that pillar for now. Kind of come around. Now, it still is like super washed out, and I'm going to go to the camera imager, turn that on. You've got exposure, which helps, but in this case, gamma is really going to be helpful in making this look a lot cooler. Now, this is really blue, but that's because of the light. If you had a white light, you could also go in and change your white balance of your camera. But I have this really blue, so I'm going to bring this down just a little bit. It should whiten my scene just a little bit, which it did. That's good. And then, of course, in your camera tag, you also have the options for different cameras. You just go through these cameras here. Try some different looks. See what looks good. You know, does the washed out thing work? You know, do you find a good camera and then, you know, mess with that gamma once you find that look? You can also do things like really up the vignetting. You know, that's kind of cool. You know, possibilities are endless, and since you're in Octane, you can really mess with this and just, you know, fine tune that look that you want. I'm gonna move over here, you know, take a couple different angles, click again here. There we go. That looks really cool. Possibilities are endless. Let's see if I got anything else to show. I think that's probably it. I think that's a good start. If I zoom out here, you can see from afar what this scene actually looks like. You know, it's just a couple planes, and you got that volume, you got that spotlight there. It's so simple, but it's so cool. And hopefully this helps you get more into it and not be so scared of it. I know that I'm feeling better after messing with it for a few days, and it's not as hard to figure out as I thought. I really, really love where this is going. If you have version 2 of Octane, you can get the alpha through the forums and really play with this and see what it has to offer. I think it's really great, and they're fine-tuning it. All the alphas keep getting better and better, less glitches, less lockups and whatnot. So shout out to those guys who are working on this plugin and who work on the Cinema 4D plugin as well. We would love it if you would subscribe to us on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel full of all sorts of Cinema 4D stuff. We just got back from NAB and have some videos from there. We also have a podcast, the BroGraph Podcast, where we talk on a weekly basis about stuff we've learned and stuff that's going on in the industry, business, graphics, all the stuff having to do with being a contractor or working as a motion graphic artist in After Effects and Cinema 4D and special effects, all that kind of stuff. And you could say you've been there, done that, got the t-shirt. You can get the No Brograph, No Mograph tee, which is available on our website, brograph.com. We're also on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Of course, YouTube is where we are for the most part. That's where our big viewer base is, other than the podcast, of course. So that about wraps it up. Until next time, have a good one. Later, bros. Brograph.com, an online resource for learning critical components of Cinema 4D and After Effects, specifically catered to help you prevail as a motion graphic designer.
What's up, bros? Welcome to another BroGraph motion graphics tutorial.
We give you professional time-saving tips, shortcuts, and lessons that help give you an edge over your fellow designers. Not only this, but our new BroGraph Talks help you in your file management, hardware configuration, and client relations.
I love projects that scare me. When our art director comes to us and asks for something that I had never done before, man, it gets me pumped.
Join us for live sessions, check out our crazy Cinema 4D experiments, or just watch our Fun with BroGraph series, where we show you practical applications for techniques learned in previous tutorials. Do this from the beginning, and your client is going to respect that, and they're going to respect you, and they're going to respect your time. Subscribe today and get automatic updates on the latest tutorials, tricks, tips, and inspiration brought to you by industry professionals Dave Koss and Matt Milstead, all with a slight dash of dry humor peppered in. Real nice banana.
Brograph.com, your source for tutorials that will help you thrive in the motion graphics industry. Don't just play around with Cinema 4D and After Effects, master it, and make money by becoming indispensable at your workplace.
We don't care how you get here, folks. Just get here. Subscribe now to BroGraph Tutorials. It's pretty good, I guess.